Dear brothers and sisters, I welcome you all to hear and see this video message. In this video, I am going to explain why unproductive cow has to kill reason for white revolution in India. Content for this video I given in the description, you can go through and study. If India wants to put milk on the table of every household, it will have to come to terms with the fact that even divine cow need human help at the end of their productive years. Just as industrialists have been demanding an exit policy to help them close failed factories without prolonged labor trouble, there has to be a policy for human culling of cattle that have become unproductive due to old age or disease. The law allows killing of buffalo but not cows. Thus, unproductive cattle are supposed to wander off into the sunset, their former guardians taking no responsibility for the animals' welfare, housing or meals. This becomes the responsibility of a few scattered cow shelters run on charity or government funds. The cow, unable to reincarnate herself as beef, ends up neglected, diseased and abused. A ban on meat production or export would lead to an abnormal rise of unproductive animals, which is inconsistent with sound animal husbandry practices. So, government should make a exit policy for cattle, especially cows. Out of a total production of 132.64 million tons of milk in 2014 in India, excluding milk from goats, 70.4 million tons or 53% was accounted for by buffaloes. The balance 62.19 million tons or 47% was from cows. Even within the 62.19 million tons, the share of crossbreeds cows containing the genetic material of western breeds like Holstein, Friesian, Jersey and Brown Swiss was 39 million tons. Indigenous cattle, the real Gaumada, contributed 28 million tons or just over the fifth of the India's bovine milk output. Farmers prefer to rear buffaloes instead of cows as they yield more milk and can later be sold for slaughter. Government livestock census data shows that between 92 and 2012, the white cattle numbers fell from 205 million to 191 million, but buffalo numbers rose from 84 million to 109 million. A typical crossbreed cow from the time of its birth takes 17 to 18 months to come to puberty and be ready for insemination. Adding 9 to 10 months of pregnancy, it will deliver its first calf and start producing milk at 27-28 months. Subsequent calving happen every 13 to 14 months, assuming 3 to 4 months of postpartum rest and 9 to 10 months pregnancy. Farmers usually don't keep a cow beyond 5 to 6 calving when milk yield is plummet and the returns do not justify the cost of feeding and maintenance. By this time, the animal would be 7 to 8 years old and still has another 5 to 6 years to live. The farmer will obviously want to then sell, and the only interested buyer here would be the butcher or the trader supplying to slaughterhouse. Farmers today keep cows only for milk. By guaranteeing a market for unproductive cattle, these include male calves in a world where tractors, electric diesel fuels and artificial insemination have made work complex and breeding pulse redundant. So, culling or selector the only solution. So, the Muslim butcher is actually providing a valuable service to the Hindu dairy farmer. Dairy farming involves the killing of unproductive, infertile and spent cows and buffaloes. Milk production starts to decline after 3 to 4 lactation pregnancies. At this stage, cows and buffaloes are sold for slaughter through middlemen or to a small farmer who will use them for an additional 2 to 3 lactations before selling them for slaughter or abandoning them. It is becoming difficult to control stray animals of cow family. Cow shelters also only need female cows and they leave the males as free. These male progenies of cow later become pulse and uncontrollable sons who can enter in any field, thus destroying crops and injuring and killing many innocent people. We have seen the condition of cows in northwestern states where they are allowed to roam around the streets and in the night sleep in open. For centuries, most Indian Hindus have considered cows sacred and allowed them to roam freely in the streets. Today, pedestrians in India's crowded cities share sidewalks with herds of wandering cattle. Cars give way to cows dozing in the middle of the road, all in deference to the most holy of animals. Many vote-greedy politicians, a few money-greedy Hindus and fanatic fundamentalist Muslims all have joined hands against the speechless cow. A country looking forward as modern nation of 21st century cannot afford such stupidities becoming our main work of life. If we ban killing of animals and leave them to die a natural death, would the agrarian economy survive? Who would rear the cattle then? Why do people rear cattle in rural India? Because cows gives birth to calves and calves become pulse. Before the mechanization of agriculture, pulse tilled the land and provided agrarian labor, so to speak. Tractors have now taken over the role of bullocks. It must be remembered that India does not depend on cow milk. The cattle have other economic benefits. Manure is used for fertilizer and fuel, and once it dies or its skin is sent to tannery and bones are used for making items such as combs. But when the economic benefits of the cattle diminish, it is better to kill them for food and sell its skins and bones. So who is going to bear the expenses of an aging or sick cow? The RSS, BJP is destroying the Indian agrarian economy. In the future, the agrarian economy will not have the cow and the bull, and the benefits arising from them will be denied to villagers. Some estimates suggest that 40% of the dairy farm's income is derived from the sale of unproductive cows. If there is no longer a market for these cows, the production cycle of dairy farmers gets jammed. This holds true for large dairy farms as well. These unproductive cows will need to be replaced by younger stocks, and no farmer is foolish enough to invest his or her precious money in a white elephant, a cow or buffalo so holy that it has no resale value. It will create the problems in India like some of the countries are waiting to dump large volumes of subsidized milk powder into India. Export of leather and meat will go down and lower classes will lose their job who all are depends upon their industry. Farmers are not going to keep their cattle and feed them after their productivity is over. So it will be increase in the number of stray cattle, which is already a big problem. In 2012, census by the Animal Husbandry Department revealed there are 5.3 million stray cattle abandoned by their owners across the country, almost 1 million of which are in urban areas. Stray animals spread vector-borne diseases, cause occupational health hazards and environmental pollution. As emaciated cows amable all over India foraging for food, we can only wonder why their owners don't feed them if they revere them as so much. They usually stop feeding them when they stop producing milk because they feel the expense is pointless. This is why Indian vets find plastic bags inside cows' stomachs. It is evident that even aversion to beef eating does not result in more compassion toward the cow. Like alcohol prohibition or the American controls over abortion, the attempt to create a blank blanket ban on cow slaughter creates a black market, hurts industry, and causes suffering to the parties concerned. The meat and beef business will be organized in the long run as unorganized sector is unable to cope up with such stringent provisions and formalities, and right to occupation will also affected. It criminalizes the dietary choices of large majority from all regions, faith for whom beef is the most affordable source of protein. Cows are dying by the thousands in cow shelters, even as production groups and political parties squabble over saving the collie cow animal. The cows that ends up at the government shelter are usually weak and ill, and the shelters have limits. They don't really care for cows. Some of the post-mortem of the cows and calves revealed that they died due to low immunity and consumption of plastic. If Gaurakshaks really care about cows, why don't they clean plastic from the streets of Indian states? The cattle shelters range from tiny pastures to large complexes. They have traditionally operated as religiously motivated charities, taking in cows abandoned by farmers because they no longer produce milk, or those dropped off by local government workers who found them wandering the streets. Some 80 million Indians eat either beef or buffalo meat, including 12.5 million Hindus. This does not mean that devout Hindus who worship the cow should not voluntarily devote themselves to its production by setting up gaushalas or cow shelters, though there is simply are not enough of these to cater to the growing number of abandoned cattle. So states with cattle slaughter bans propose increased public investment for gausalas and persuading farmers to rear unproductive animals for dung and urine. According to data available with the government-aided cow shelters, 80% of the animal in cow shelters are not cows but all stray. They get are pulse and male calves. Of the remaining 20%, most are old and are diseased cows that dairy owners abandon after they stop giving milk. Only a small percentage, shelter managers say 1 to 2% are milch cows. Illegal dairies and farmers that operate from urban areas abandon those that are useless to them. The dairy owners do not want to pay the cost of feeding cattle. They let out milch cows to roam during the day and take them back in the evening. All the cattle on the road belong to someone. Setting up of cow sanctuaries in India is easier said than done. It is very difficult to find land for such shelters. With 76 million cows, India is now the world's largest milk producer, producing 140 million tons of milk a year. Most cows past their milk producing age end up being tanned to leather and beef rather than living out their years in cow shelters, a retirement home of sorts for cows. Even if government identifies lands, developing it, constructing cow sheds and daily management of the animal is an enormous task. According to the cattle census of 2012, there are 53 lakh stray cattle including cows, bullocks and bulls. In states where BJP are in the power, the number of such stray cattle are large. At an all India level, the minimum cost of feeding 53 lakh stray cattle would be around 20,000 crores rupees a year at 100 rupees per head. But in Haryana, for example, Mr. Qatar gives only 40 rupees per head of cattle to registered gausalas. Since these gausalas also include milch cattle which require a different, more expensive diet, the useless cattle even in gausalas starves to death. Such is the hypocrisy of the Hindutva right. One fact is clear, that a farmer will find it difficult to own cow and its family, as what happens once he stops giving milk. Where to cremate it? Do we need the enormous dangers of all this? We don't have space to cremate for human being. The biofuel is no more available, and for burial we won't have enough space in future. And we are now asking for more. At home our parents suffer and we don't care for her mothers fully. We don't even feel her worthy of staying with her sons and daughters even when we have the capacity to keep her with us. It's the biggest hypocrisy of our time. Moreover, we appreciate those who cater their cattle but need to see what happened in the later years. A RTA revealed that Indian Army gives a decent euthanasia to its celebrity dogs when they are out of use or say retired. Don't these dogs have right to life after they have finished their work in the army? It is clear that army has purely a work-based relationship with these dogs, and once their services are over, they are killed. It shows that human relationship with animals, even when we all love them, is still they are useful to us. We love them even for some more years, but it may not be possible to keep them for over and doing seva of them as Hindu extremists want us to do. Not everyone has huge funds, land and donation to serve them as the big baffas in these days. All the animals can be useful to us during the life and even after the life too by their derivatives. We have seen that people are questioning why they should not protect our mothers from slaughter. I am not saying this should not, but under the current laws you can't enforce someone to stop consuming beef. Also, people are comparing cow slaughter with cannibalism. Do you really think these two things weigh the same on scale? Would you allow some other fellow human to eat polythene back on road? No, right. But you allow our mother's cow to roam freely and eat filth. Now, no Gauraksha can deny it. Even city has pulse and cows throwing around garbage dumping spot. Is it not your duty to provide food to your mother, or your Gaurakshak's duty to provide food to your mother? Or Gau vigilante duty is only to beat other humans who are transporting cows from one state to another because you think they are being taken for slaughter? It is not your duty to allow your brother call of the cow to have his mother's milk first before you can have it. Go to any dairy farm and look the condition of calves and cows. Cows are separated from their calves when they are born so that the calf may not drink up the entire milk. Gaurakshas can't be a savior of your mother's just by saving her life when her entire life is nothing more than a saga of misery. On one hand, they have thoroughly commercialized the dairy sector by inflicting unbearable pains on cow, and the other hand they claim to be Gaurakshas. The only role religion played in the cattle economy was in determining the method of getting rid of unwanted cattle. Rather than sending cows to slaughterhouses, but North Indian farmers preferred a method of slow death through deliberate starvation due to the ban on cattle slaughter. This hollow ban on beef does nothing for cattle in India. If anything, it cuts more than it helps because it's more about a regressive conservatism and politics. At the Vedas, the cow was revered, but at the same time, beef was relished by all classes and caste of society, including the upper caste. In the 20th and 21st century, the issue of cow production vis-a-vis slaughter has been used to deepen the fault lines between the non-beef eating Hindu majority and those that eat beef. Vegetarianism fueled by religion is very different from making an informed choice on animal welfare. The ban is an instrument of power play in the hands of the country's political class, and it makes a joke of the real issue of cattle welfare. There have traditionally been two main arguments in favor of cow production. First, the cow is the pivot of agricultural economy. Second, it is central to Hindu religious belief. Neither of these two arguments can justify the harsh punishment that are rather casually being talked about. The economic argument does not survive an empirical test. First, as farming in India becomes increasingly mechanized, the demand for trapped cattle in the field is falling. Second, as milk producing cows grow old and become unproductive, they become an financial burden on farmers. If farmers cannot sell them off to slaughterhouses, they either abandon of the animal or starve them to death. The issue of religious sentiment is more tricky one. If the beef ban has been imposed for ethical reasons, that is to prevent the suffering of animals, then how is a cow different from chicken or goat or even its close relative of buffalo? Why are not other animals included within the ambit of the law? Beef, which was the calf of the brace of mutton, was a cheap source of proteins for India's poor. Simple economics tells us that pulling beef off the shelves, which lead to an increase in the prices and demand for other meat, especially chicken, which will in turn increases the suffering of countless animals. There is nothing ethical about the conditions in which most chicken are raised incidentally. If the cow is sacred because of her milk, her suffering is because of that milk too. Most cows in India are reared for use in the dairy industry. Those that are fit for milk production are constantly impregnated, separated from their calves and pumped with hormones in order to keep up milk production. Animal welfare is more than just animal rescue and worship. It is fact that our sustenance is derived from the environment, which includes animals. Welfare needs to encompass empathy for these creatures by negating the suffering that we may bring upon them to the least possible extent. Ethics and moral compass is not a political ordinance. They should guide us a build society that privilege non-violence, the same ahimsa that we taught internationally. Rather than a society divided by religion, if the interest of cattle are indeed our concern, it requires a comprehensive overhaul of the system that govern industries that depend on cattle, stringent enforcement of animal welfare laws, and most importantly, individual lifestyle changes. All this requires the individual and collective exercise of our will. Hindu extremist says that the cow gives milk, which is essentially for rearing all of us, so the cow is our mother and hence deserves to be protected from slaughter. But as a matter of ethics, as if one was speaking of a man's relationship with his wet nurse. On this supposition, the buffalo is an even greater mother of Hindus than the cow, as buffaloes in North India provide more milk than cows. But nobody worshipped the poor buffalo. The only role religion played in the cattle economy was in determining the method of getting rid of unwanted cattle. In the name of religious tolerance, Indian governments have long resisted pressure to impose a nationwide ban on cattle butchering because millions of Indian Muslims and Christians and even many Hindus happily eat beef. Beef prohibition would also throw thousands of people out of work, upset the natural balance between livestock and humans, and violate Indian constitution. A dairy farmer who have 20 cows would seek to replace 5 to 6 old animals with a new stock every year. It enables him to maintain an optimal herd balance with the right mix of animals already in milk, those that are pregnant and dry, and calves are young hybrids going to produce in future. Regular herd turnover, disposal of cows past their productive age, and induction of fresh milk cattle is what ensures a certain minimum level of milk sales around the year. For most Indian farmers, a cow fast is of little value. Besides, tractors have long replaced pulse and oxen and they are little used to. So the cattle are sold to traders who supply them to slaughter cows in India, both legal and illegal. Assuming a desired annual head turnover or replacement rate of 25%, this requirement clearly cannot be met by cow shelters in Indian states. The livestock population in India has increased by 4.6% from 512 million in 2012 to nearly 536 million in 2019. The 20th livestock census shows that nearly 75% of the total cattle in the country are female cows, a clear sign of dairy farmers' preference for milk producing cattle. Uttar Pradesh has recorded highest livestock population in 2019. As per 2019 livestock census, total cattle production in the country is 192.49 million, which is only 36% of livestock population. Buffaloes 20%, goats 27%, sheep 13%, comprising 62% of livestock, but government much concentrated on cow welfare, not with remaining livestock. Life expectancy of cow in India varies between 15 and 20 years. Dairy industry sources says cows generally stop producing milk about 5 years before their death. Consider from the 192 million cattle population, 75% will be female cow, that is 144 million cows in India now. In this we assume 25% not productive by not mulching and gives less milk, aging or spent, that is 36 million cows in India. To maintain these unproductive cattle in cow slaughter, it requires a bare minimum of rupees 100 per cow required. So cumulative cost of sustaining a dry cow for a year would translate to roughly 3,65,000 rupees. To government would have to shell out 1.3 lakh crore annually. This figure is higher than the allocation made by the government for education budget, that is 99,300 crore. The cost of acquiring land for cow sheds and initial investment is building the infrastructure has to be additionally incurred. In this present finance trust deficit situation in India, government unable to spend this much money only spend for cow production to lobby Hindutva forces. So only thing union government and state government should allow cow slaughter for white revolution in our country. Ban on slaughter of cattle is not desirable in India under any circumstances. We should cover the total prohibition of slaughter of all useful cattle other than animals unfit for work and breed owing to age, injury or deformity or any incurable disease. The slaughter of cattle should be permitted upon obtaining a fit for slaughter certificate, to be issued only if the animal is not economical or is not likely to become economical for the purpose of breeding or trout agricultural operations, or deemed to be uneconomical for purpose of milking. All old and spent female cattle whose milk yield is not economical. The certificate should be issued by any veterinary doctor and should not be a source of much corruption and misuse. He and she free from religious, caste and political bias. Slaughtering of above animals should be regulated by the government in order to maintain public health and sanitation. The law on ban of this export of cows, calves, bulls and bullocks from India and interest should be removed and should not be criminalized. These transporting the animal vehicle for the purpose of slaughter and carrying cow meat. But ban slaughter law is aimed at protecting cows, their progeny, indigenous cattle breeds and the bovine economy. Its camouflages the state's intent to use the law to defend a dominant notion of Indian culture. Slaughter does not drive down animal numbers but actually supports their reproduction, and slaughter bans actively depress cattle rearing. This hollow ban of beef does nothing for cattle in India. If anything, it cuts more than it helps because it's more about a aggressive conservatism and politics. Bible talks about cow slaughter for cow preservation in Genesis chapter 47 verse 16 to 17. And Joseph answered, "Give your livestock and I will give you food in exchange for your livestock if your money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in exchange for the horses, the flocks and herds, and the donkeys. He supplied them with food in exchange for all their livestock that year. Also in Leviticus chapter 22 verse 28. But you must not kill the animal and its mother on the same day. This rule is the same for cattle and sheep.